So I got this question that says, how do I transfer transactions from one QuickBooks file to another? Sometimes I need to merge QuickBooks files, and I want to make sure that all the transactions from both files are on a single file. Okay, so I'm going to answer your question, but also I'm going to address the actual wording and the scenario of the question. In this video, I'm going to show you how to transfer transactions from one QuickBooks file to another, whether you're trying to merge them or you're trying to create a new file, maybe a new clean file, and you want to be very selective about the transactions and the list items that you want to bring in. So I'm going to talk about how to do that. So again, whether you're trying to merge files or create a new file and only transfer certain files, that's what this video is going to be all about. Now, I'm also going to preface by answering that there's essentially what I can think of 3 ways to do it. One is to use what's called the IIF Export. I'm actually going to put a link in the description below that shows a video where I kind of spend 12 minutes explaining how to do that process. So I won't cover that in this video. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to check out the IIF process. Now, what I don't like about the IIF process is that some transactions get left out and you really don't know until you go through the motions and actually do the process. And the other thing that I don't like about the IIF process is that you don't get to control the date range or the type of transactions that you want to copy. Is basically all or none. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 is to use a piece of software called Data Transfer Utility by a company called Q2Q.us. Now, Data Transfer Utility has existed for many, many years. I think I'm going to go in the website and look at the price. I think it's about $169. And yep, confirming it's $169. But the app itself is kind of clunky, just kind of the way it works. It's kind of clunky. I don't want to criticize it for what it is. It's just built in Microsoft Access. And you have to click a lot of things. And if you don't have experience, it's kind of difficult to kind of keep track of what's going on. The utility actually works. And for many, many situations, I have used that utility. However, instead of showing you how to use that utility, I'm going to show you how to use a different one called Transaction Pro. Currently, my favorite tool to use for all sorts of data import, data export, and data transfer jobs. Transaction Pro is going to cost you, let's look at the pricing here on the website, it's going to cost you $299 for the license that covers importer, exporter, and Pro. And that's not an annual subscription, it's just a one-time fee. Yes, it's more expensive than the data transfer utility. However, the problem with the data transfer utility is I can't use it to just do imports or exports. It's basically for transferring data only. What I like about Transaction Pro Importer Exporter is that I can use it for standalone exporting, standalone importing, and for transfer as well. So let's do a deep dive on explaining how Transaction Pro works. I'll put a link in the description below so you can check it out. So I'm working with QuickBooks Desktop, and then I'm going to launch Transaction Pro that I have in my computer somewhere. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to get this window that basically is asking me, would you like to do an import, export, or delete? So we're going to start with export naturally. So we're going to click on export, and then it's going to connect to the QuickBooks file. It's going to ask you, hey, am I supposed to have access to this QuickBooks file? Are you allowing a third-party program, third-party software to go into the QuickBooks file and read information? So at this point, we're going to hit yes, and then we'll click on continue. That's how you authorize QuickBooks to be able to talk to this third-party software that essentially is getting data out of it or putting data in. Now I want to minimize QuickBooks to avoid confusion there, and I just have the Transaction Pro Exporter window. You will notice on the left-hand side where you have a list of either list items like accounts or transactions like bills. So you pick any of them one at a time. For example, you select account, and then you come in here and click on where it says receive data. Once you click on receive data, it's going to include a list or export a list of all your accounts from your chart of accounts. And you can choose whether you want CSV file, tab, or Excel. I typically use CSV, is the standard. Then I'm going to click on export to file click there, export to file, and then I'm going to give it a name and call it account list. Okay, account list. Then you would click on save, and then you would be done. Now, I actually went through the exercise of going into that company file, or the one that I want to transfer from, and I did an export of every single one of the lists and the transactions. One thing I want to show you is when you export a list, for example, it's going to give you an option that says since last export. So if you're exporting weekly or monthly or whatever, and you want to only see the new items that were added after that export, that's a nice little filter to have, right? So I've already exported. So then if I click on that, it's not going to export anything else because I've already exported. So that's a pretty cool little feature that's there. If I do transactions like a bill, I get to choose bill by number. So if I go from bill 1 to bill 10,000 or whatever, I'm just going to leave that at default. And then date. So if I only want to export a transaction date of 2019, 2020, 2021, I can basically pick the year or the date range that I want to export. And then I can also click whether or not I want to export bills that have been paid or unpaid or both. So I get the choice for that. Unfortunately, this setting doesn't allow me to choose paid as of when. This is whether they've been paid ever or not. So you kind of have to just keep that in mind. There's also a little checkbox here that says suppress transaction lines. That's if you actually want to include every single line item of the bill. If you click on suppress and click on retrieve data, it's going to exclude every line item and just export each of the bills in this case as just one line per se. So if you want the line items, you have to uncheck suppress. If you don't want the line items, you will suppress. So that in a nutshell is how you export lists or transactions. You will notice also that there's a couple of strange ones like this one called journal report. That's basically technically not a transaction list. It's actually a report of all the journals entered into the system, which will essentially include every single transaction like a check or an invoice, but in this sort of general ledger journal format. That is not useful for importing later on. So a journal report is not something you use for data transfer. There's another one here called payroll detail report. So in principle, this tool cannot export paychecks and cannot import paychecks. So the payroll detail report, what it is a report of all the paycheck data in detail. This file might not have any, that's why it's saying that. So it's a report that contains all that, and then you might have to reconstruct it into a regular check to be able to import it. That's a more advanced sort of topic. So long story short, regardless of which technique you use, data transfer utility, IIF, Transaction Pro, payroll is kind of a weird protected area of QuickBooks, and it's not going to be a smooth thing to bring over. For that, you might have to think about exactly how you want to bring it. The other ones that are worth looking at here is this one that says invoice with payments. That's actually a combination of invoices and payments on the same export. For data transfer, I would skip that and just do the invoice by itself and then the receive payments by itself. You want to keep them as two separate things. And there's also the transaction detail report, which is similar to the journal report. Basically is every single transaction in detail. Again, not useful for importing or for data transfer. Maybe just useful for sort of backup purposes. So that transaction detail report and the other two reports I mentioned, they're useful, but they just don't work for importing. Okay, so we went ahead and exported every single one and saved a CSV file, an Excel file in a folder of every single transaction, and we're done with our export. We picked our date range, whatever happens to be. That was our choice. Now, something even more interesting to mention is I can open any of these. Let's say I want to open the invoice list, open it in Excel because I exported as a CSV file, and I can manually in my Excel file delete anything in here that I don't want. So I can go through it and see, look, is this something that I wanted? Do I want to change the dollar amounts, change the class, change any of the components in it, the item, whatever happens to be. I can go through this and pick which of these transactions I'm open to bringing in into the new file and which ones are not, simply by just deleting them or changing them. So that's actually pretty cool, very flexible. One of the reasons I like Transaction Pro importer exporter combination so much. I'm going to go ahead and click on exit and get out of the exporter. And I should also go into my QuickBooks and switch QuickBooks files. So log out of the old file where I was getting the data from, and then log in into the new file where I want to put the data into. Okay, so let's assume that we are already on the new file, or the file that I want to merge into. I'm going to run a quick profit and loss report here. Quick profit and loss report, and click on all dates just so we can see the current kind of numbers that we have. So notice that our net income here is 123,000. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to bring in some transactions, and you're going to see how that data is going to come in. Some of the ways that you can differentiate after the fact when you do the export and the import is with classes. So if you actually have classes enabled, you just want to make sure that all on the current file, everything is under a class. Like right now, like these are classes basically. So everything's under class, nothing is under unclassified. And then when you import the stuff, also make sure that there's classes on everything that you exported from the old file. So then when they import, worst case scenario, you can always come in here, do it by class, and kind of see what it looks like with the new data. And we'll do the same thing here. When we do the import, you're going to see a whole bunch of new classes come in because the other file had additional classes in it. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through the import, and I'm going to click on import. And a couple of things you have to think about. This is kind of a manual process because it's not smart enough to kind of like do it all in batch. So you kind of have to know what specific order to do this in. So the first thing you need to import is your account list. So you're going to click on on browse. Then you're going to click on account list, and then you're going to click on open. So you're going to load your chart of accounts basically. Then you're going to click down here where it says import type, select account list. Okay. And then we're going to click on next, and then click OK, and then next. And then it says field matching, right? Because I've exported, I can click here where it says field match. It will automatically match the headers of these Excel files into where you're supposed to go. Otherwise, I can click on any of these and pick which of the columns from the export are going to map to which column in the import, right? So, but field match typically just takes care of it. Then I click on next. Okay. Then I'm going to click on next. Then I'm going to click on finish, and then OK. And then a TPI will now import 106 accounts that were on that CSV file that were exported from the old file or whatever file we're getting data from. Then we're going to click OK, and then we'll get a report of any errors that you have. It lets you know whether or not they were able to be imported or not, or if it allows you to import into it. You can go and read through the error log and save the error log if you need to try to troubleshoot what happened afterwards. So we imported the account list. Next thing we need to import is the customer list. So we'll go to the customer list and then click on next. Okay. Actually, let's go back for a second. We got to click on browse and pick the file with a customer list. So let's go to customer list. Got to make sure I bring that in there. Okay. So I've selected the Excel file customer list, and also the import file. I'm telling it is a customer list. Then I'm going to click on next, then on next. Then I'm going to click on field match. Beautiful. It matches all the fields. Okay. It didn't match a customer name. Let's see why that happened. I'll just pick that there. Okay. I don't know why it missed that. Let's go down to see if it missed any others. Okay. Resale number. Maybe that didn't export at all. Let's see if that even exported. Resale number. Okay. So the field match is not perfect. And so you might have to go through and see if there's any of these fields haven't been matched. So yeah, this is something that was missed. So let me go in and match the mapping. So what I'm doing is making sure that whatever the QuickBooks import software tells me that the field names in QuickBooks are, I have to make sure that I tell it what this looks like in the Excel file. The Automatch or that field match, it wasn't perfect, but you know, we got pretty far into it. Okay, I guess we're good here. Then I'm going to click on next. Okay, and then it's going to go through the processing. And this is basically sort of like a quick preview. So you can go through it and see what the data looks like. You can click on view in larger grid. If you kind of this is basically just a preview of that Excel file. And then we can actually in here also select specific rows that we want to delete. So if you didn't delete it on the Excel file, you can delete it in this grid prior to the import. Then we're going to click on next, then finish, then OK. Okay, and then we'll just wait to see. There's 48 customers that are being imported. Here, there's the processing bar, so we'll wait for that. Perfect. So that finished, we'll click OK. Then we get a report letting me know that pretty much everything was imported. So all the customers imported, no problem, no errors. The next one, I want to click on Browse. And then we did account list and we did customer list. So the other stuff that you see on an invoice is an item list. So we definitely got to bring the item list and then click here where it says item list and then click on open. And then here under import type, we're going to go to item list and then we're going to click on next and then next. Then we're going to click on field match. Okay, that seems like it matched most of. Let's see if tax code was there. There it is. It didn't match that one. Cost. Let's see where cost is. Okay, that's sales cost. For some reason, or is it? That should be purchase cost actually. Let's see price. Price is going to be in this, I would assume is sales cost. Okay, sales cost. I don't know all these things by heart most of the time. Okay, let's see. Let's do manufacturer's part number. That's here. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so that's it. That matches everything. Everything's matching. And then we're going to click on next. Okay, then we'll click on next. Finish. Okay. And we wait for this one. Okay, perfect. So those items imported. We'll click OK, close, and then we'll go back. And now let's import the invoices. We've done the accounts. We've done the items. We did the customers. Now we can do the invoices. So I'll go to Browse and select my invoice list here. Hit Open. And then under Import Type, I'll change that and put Invoice. And then click on Next. Next. And then I'm going to click on Field Match. Okay, it matched some of them. Transaction date, I'm going to put right here. Transaction date, TXN date is called. And then template name, we can leave that out. Build to, we definitely want to bring that in. So bring those build to lines and the ship to lines as well. For some reason, it's not automatically catching it. And that's because the header names are slightly different. So you notice, like, for example, well, those it should have cut those. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not catching them. So, oh yeah, because there's no space between build to, but on the Excel there is a space between the build to. So if I would have modified the Excel headers, it would have cut that. Actually, let's see if that's the case. Let me hit cancel real quick. Let's just try that. That might be a good example to discuss how headers get automatically matched anyway. So let's see. So no space between bill and to for line 1, line 2, and line 3. So I'll just change those 3, see what happens with the auto match. Maybe that will work. So let's go to import. Let's select invoice file. Let's do invoice, hit open. Import type, that's going to be invoice. Next. Next. Field match. Yeah, I noticed that did work. So you do need to make sure that the header names in the Excel file match exactly like it is on Transaction Pro Importer. Or if it doesn't, you're going to have to go in there and manually match all these things. So I'll just finish doing the build to, and I'll skip the ship to for experience, but you need to make sure you have that in there if you need to. Is there a rep field? Let's see, why is it Not, okay. So here's called sales rep. That's why I didn't catch that one. Customer message, is that even in here? I don't even see that one as an exported field. So that's interesting. That one didn't even export, or at least I don't see it anywhere here. So it's importable, but it didn't export, which is pretty interesting. So maybe we'll skip that. Let's just double check. No, there's no customer message in there. Item. Okay, let's see what happened with item. That one's really important. That one's in red because it's a required field. So let's see this. Okay, this is called transaction line item right here. Transaction line item. Let's keep going down here. We got quantity. This one should be called transaction line quantity. Then we got description. That should be called transaction line description. Perfect. Then we got price. So that will be called transaction line cost. Yeah, cost, that makes sense. Item line class. Let's see if we have that. Transaction line class. Yes, we do. Service date. I don't think we're using that, but let's see. Transaction line service date. Oh, we are. Okay, we have that in there. Let's see. Sales tax item. Do we have one for that? Let's see. Sales tax item. There we go. And other one. Okay, AR account. Is that being used? AR account. Yes, it is. And then sales tax code. Let's go down to sales tax. Sales tax code. Okay. So notice I had to go through and make sure the mapping worked. And after you do mapping, you can click here on Save As, and you can create a sample mapping. So you'll do sample invoice mapping. So if I ever have another Excel file that looks exactly like that, same exact headers, I can just click on Load Map, load that file in there, and I don't have to manually go through assigning them there. So let's click on Next, and let's see what happens with this one. So we'll wait for this one. Okay, that finished importing 116 line items, which is going to be, at most 116 invoices, or it could be 20 or 30 if each one contains a whole bunch of line items. So that finished that, and then I hit on close, and then I'll close that, and I'll just get out of this and then go into QuickBooks. Now, I'll confess to you that there's some editing involved. There are errors in the process of this. It's not 100% as smooth as this video makes it sound. You're going to get prompted. It's going to tell you, hey, you got this error. You got to fix this problem. You just have to kind of follow the prompt. And in some cases, you have to clean up that Excel file or make tiny corrections to that Excel file prior to importing. Now we're looking at the QuickBooks file. Notice I have a lot more classes. That's because of the data we imported. Probably the easiest way to appreciate this is to group those classes from old file to new file, so then you can kind of see the two data sets that were merged together. So I'm going to go into list, class list, and this is because I specifically mentioned that I would recommend making sure that all the transactions have classes right before importing. Okay, so I'm going to go in there and create a new class, and we're going to call this old file, just old file, and then I'm going to make the classes from the old file a sub-account of this old file class. That way I can kind of group them together. So I remember these is installation, and the other one was automatic pull system. So we'll do that one. And then I think reimbursable cost was the other one. So we'll leave that be. So we'll make Deb, Jonathan, and reimbursable, make them all sub-accounts. Let's just call it new file. So I'm going to go to new and then call this new file. And then I'll make Deb Wood sub-account of new file. Or I think new is probably that one to use. Let's do existing. I think existing makes a lot more sense from this context, right? Because we're copying the data into the existing file or the destination file. Old file, we could also call that source file. This is just for now, just so we can get a good visual to kind of how this data came in. So I'm just making them all subcategories. Okay, good. They're all grouped together. So I'll escape out of that. And then I'm going to click on collapse columns in the top. And then we get to see existing file. you got all the invoicing that was done on the existing file, and then you got old file, all the new invoicing that was done on the old file. You can tell because we were merging a pool company with an engineering company, and the existing file contained accounts like engineering revenue, markup income, and reimbursable expense income. And then you look at the old file, that one contained pool equipment sales and revenue installation service and revenue repair service. So just with the account names, you can tell that they're not exactly the same because they happen to be new account names from the perspective of the new file. And there's some things unclassified here. That's because originally the existing file didn't have everything under a class, but we really wanted the classes for the invoices to show, so you can really illustrate exactly what happened here with the import. So again, Transaction Pro Importer, it can export, it can also delete, which we're not going to cover, and it can import. And what's really cool about it is when you click on import, there's going to be a little link here that says sample files. If you click on that link, it will take you to the browser, and I'm actually going to take this specific link and put it on the description so you can go straight to it if you don't have Transaction Pro yet, and you can download a sample file for the import. So I'm going to download a sample file for the import to show you. I'm going to open that in Excel, and it's basically one big spreadsheet that contains every single transaction type and list type that you can import. So you can go into each of these and you get kind of sample data here, kind of letting you know, okay, this is what it needs to look like if you're going to import using Transaction Pro Importer. On this example, we exported from an existing file, so we didn't have to load any data in a template. It basically built the template for you, and then we auto-matched some fields and we had to manually select some fields. But with this file, with the sample, this is where you have data, maybe not from QuickBooks, from some other source, and you want to organize it in a way that Transaction Pro Importer can read it and can import it into QuickBooks. So that's it. I hope this was useful. Again, I'll put all the links on the description below, and you might need some guidance in the process of this. Hopefully the video gets you started, but it's very rare that an average user picks up the software and transfers data glitch free. Okay, I gotta be 100% honest with you. I love Transaction Pro Importer. I bought it. I continue to have my clients buy it when I do projects to help clients transfer data and import data. They buy it, but it's not a software for a basic user, even for an intermediate user. You do need to be sort of an advanced techie user to kind of have the patience to go through all the little errors and the Excel cleanup and all that stuff that happens in the process. So again, I'll put all the links in the description below. If you're going to buy the software, use my link because I do get a little spiff for promoting it as well. Hopefully the video was useful. And again, I'll see you on the next one.